Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss what early reports are saying about how phase two of our shiny new post-Brexit standards controls are going. Now, you may imagine that I'm going to report that quelle surprise, the experts were right, and what they warned about is indeed happening. However, I regret to inform you that although this is broadly correct, things appear to be even worse. Silly experts actually seem to have downplayed the problems British businesses would face. So the idea of the flour industry getting hit by the new Brexit checks, no great surprise. They were warning about the problems they expected to face a long time ago. Particular concern that the requirements were coming into force in spring when, there's quite a lot of flour sales. And the concerns were not simply based around the trade friction that standards controls would necessarily introduce. Businesses have accepted that these are going to happen ever since we became committed to leaving the single market. The concerns have been specifically about the systems designed to cope for it not being either very good or even very ready. The nature of the checks planned risk damaging the goods themselves, as well as causing delays. And delays are a bit of a problem when you're talking about things that only have a very limited shelf life. And the computer systems were not finished even just a few weeks before they were due to come online. And it's not like our government has a good track record of rolling out new IT systems, let's be honest. Now, according to a new report, traders have said the checks were more than they were led to believe. There's been cases of lorries being held up for hours only to be then waved through. When the checks first came online at the start of the month, ITV were reporting that lorries were essentially just being waved through. But this issue of holding the lorries up for hours only to then sort of say, oh yeah, we haven't got time to check, off you go. That is all too common practice with customs control, so it should have come as no surprise. I've heard plenty of accounts of lorries being diverted for customs checks, waiting around 4 hours only to be told, sorry, there's not enough staff to actually carry out the checks. You should just carry on with your journey, having stopped for a long time for nothing. And this is what trade and logistics experts have often not taken account of. And certainly there was no great conversation about it before Brexit itself. There is a certain gravity to trading systems. There were very predictable consequences, which we were warned about. But one thing we often weren't warned about is that the Tories would be so incompetent that we'd get extra friction with Brexit simply because they would be incapable of implementing the systems to cope. The Guardian has reported customs brokers saying there have been way more checks carried out than is supposed to be the case. The suggestion is because the system... Well, one problem is the system couldn't cope with the Latin names of the flowers. So there were types of plants coming across and they were looking on the system for them. It's like, it's not there. So they were having to, the entry just was not there. Or they were having to, they couldn't use the English name for it. They had to use the Latin name for it and they weren't familiar with the Latin name for it. Or even in some cases, the entry was not there at all. I think it mentioned in the article, sometimes they were like, chrysanthemums coming in that they were putting down as roses, like they were putting down as the wrong plant because the real plant wasn't there in either English or Latin or anything. And so what has happened is you've had more referred for checks than was intended, more delays, although it doesn't suggest this in the article as well. See, I've been following the stories of how the government have been designing Brexit systems for quite a few years, as most of you all know. And one feature that keeps cropping up is that the government all too often were not involving industry in the design of these systems, or at least not early enough in the process. Now, I suspect this was to avoid people finding out just how damaging Brexit was. But if you don't involve end users in the process of a design early on, you are going to make a mess of the final implementation. If you're not actually designing the system with the people who are going to use the system, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And as a result of these problems, there are reports of a lot of customers just not getting their flowers in time. One trader was quoted as saying that, a delay of more than 9 hours, that's it. Your flowers are too late for the wedding. In fact, they'll arrive too late for anything. Flowers don't last long. It's a bit like the fish all over again, isn't it? If you can't get them to market quickly, they're no longer fresh enough. So Brexit is not just knackering people's holiday plans, but wedding and funerals as well. In fact, if Brexit were a person, it would be the one who turns up to your party, drinks all the booze and throws up in your bed. Another business owner said that 15 trucks which came across last Tuesday, only one of them was flagged for a check, but then on the journey, all of them got messages to divert for checks. They turned up and it was said, I don't know what the other 14 of you are here for, we haven't got you down, it was an IT failure, IT cock-up. So extra delays, which are not an inevitable consequence of Brexit as such, but do seem to be an inevitable consequence of half-assed government systems. And I wish someone would explain to me why the mainstream media keep doing this. I get it if it's like Tory media, but The Guardian is hardly pro-Tory, and yet they still do the same thing. You have this pointless comment right at the end of the article. It quotes the government trying to defend itself, which is fine. Obviously, you say to the government, we've got these things we're going to report. What would you like to say in return? Absolutely fine. But it quotes the government without comment or fact check. And they keep doing this, giving the government the last word. But this one is particularly ridiculous. It quotes DEFRA saying, and I quote, claims of disruption due to new checks are false. So the article has just chronicled a load of verified cases where the new checks have disrupted things. Why on earth would it allow the government to then say that the claims which the author of the article has just detailed are false? Because that's what the government's doing. It's literally, the Guardian have published a comment from the government saying, what you've said in your article is a load of lies. And you haven't said a word in your own defence. And even without the systems falling over, it should be obvious new checks, of course that's going to cause disruption. If you change any process, it will cause disruption. How could it be any other way? It's such a stupid thing for the government to say. Surely they'd have been better saying something like, you know, the level of disruption has been overstated, or like teething problems, it'll be sorted in a week or two. To say that it doesn't exist at all is utterly bonkers. And to tell every business which complains about the disruption, which is very real for them, caused by these checks, by saying to these businesses that they're liars, that also seems suboptimal to me in election year. But it continually blows my mind that journalists in the mainstream media do this. Give the government the last word with a direct quote and no element of a fact check to what they're actually saying. Concentrating checks at one small border is going to create delays. Having an inefficient system which was not developed and tested with end users is going to create extra delays. Trying to do the entire thing on the cheap without enough staff and facilities is going to create extra delays. This is simple trade gravity. The Tories sought to defy it. When Jacob Rees-Mogg would talk about, digital solutions, you know, he was the equivalent of a man flapping his arms in an attempt to fly like a bird. And it's worth considering the trajectory here. So we've now got increased emphasis on the idea that Sunak really does intend to hold the election this autumn or even later. Well, we're going to see something at the end of summer, aren't we? Trade naturally ramps up from about mid-August as we start gearing up for the high consumer holidays in autumn leading up to Christmas. There are going to be consequences with extra delays hitting that attempted build-up of trade. Even if most lorries end up simply being waved through, if they're delayed for hours before that happens, you know, you're going to get delays, we're going to get some shortages, we're going to certainly get extra costs. Just as the Tories kick off an election where the number one issue for many voters is the cost of living crisis. Good plan. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.